your signature and your date, your company information, so that we know that you're aware of it, that you've understood it, and that you're agreeing to it. So it's really that first cover page that you're signing back and including as part of your submission. Because whatever came after that, if it was amended pages or amended forms, we're assuming you're going to take that information and adjust your proposal response accordingly, or use the updated forms when you're submitting it. We have had instances where people acknowledge an amendment, and then they forget about the actual form itself, and they submit their pricing on the old form. And if the new form has enough material changes, then again, they're not going to get the full points. So you want to make sure, what we're looking for is that you've acknowledged it and that you're agreeing to whatever was part of that solicitation amendment. But then there's a part two, and that is in your actual proposal, you need to address what those changes were. Yes?
Yeah, one more.
Sure.
This is actually on the evaluation reference twice. And a lot of times I find that the people are not directly involved in that area of expertise. And I don't know what, I'm in security, and we found that sections of our proposal were given to people not in the security business for evaluation. So we found that we had to write it in what I'm going to call layman's terms to get a higher score, because the score we got from security was very high. The score we got from the office worker was very low.
Now, what jurisdiction was that in?
That was actually a state bid.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is because the way, and great question again, because in Montgomery County, the way our evaluations go, it's based on a majority vote. So there's individual reviews of each proposal. So each qualification and selection committee member are going to independently review them, but then they're going to come together. So where you may have different skill sets or different expertise, they're going to come together as a group, and they're going to discuss the proposals, discuss what each one sees, because you also, one member may have missed seeing something, or one member may have read it differently. So they benefit from having that discussion and then having the majority vote. So that's how the county's evaluation process in a nutshell works. And in the county, more often than not, the actual folks or the actual department who the service is for are going to be on that qualification and selection committee. There are times, depending on what it is, like if we're buying an enterprise system, for example, it may not just be every single person on the team may not be an IT person, but you may have someone that's a financial person because of certain modules. You may have someone that's more of a project manager who's going to be administering. So there may be multiple skill sets or multiple kind of positions that are represented in that evaluation committee to really understand the breadth of that proposal. But we do our things independently first, and then we come together, and the final score is based on a team approach, because if you do have multiple skill sets, you want to benefit from the discussion of all members, so that discussion takes place and everyone kind of understands what they saw in the proposal and how that matches the criteria, and then the ultimate scoring. So you're not going to see individual scores in the county. You're going to see the majority vote. And you're also going to be ensured that not only does the individual occur, but then that they come together for a majority score. Okay? Now, we do have instances in our evaluation where the county may not have a certain expertise, or they may have an expertise, but they really are looking for a much more broader, more technical, and we'll go out. We have members of our team who might be from the state, who might be from the schools. We might have a consultant. We make sure that there is not a conflict of interest. It's not something that they're in the industry bidding on also, but we may have a consultant that comes on board as part of an evaluation team to make sure that we really do have the right skill sets to be able to review proposals. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I actually have a couple of questions also. Can you explain the process?
Which process?
Evaluating proposals.
Sure. Once we get proposals in, We kind of vetted in our office first in terms of some of the core things, like were amendments acknowledged? Do we have the acknowledgement page? Every proposal is going to have an acknowledgement page where you sign and you're basically agreeing to the requirements of that RFP. So really important to also make sure that acknowledgement page becomes a part of your proposal. It's going to be listed right there as one of the first things that you see in the proposal submission section. So once we get the proposals, we look for a couple of key things or see if there's anything kind of out of sync. There may be certain business relations and compliance requirements that have to be cleared up front, and then we send the proposals to the Qualification Selection Committee with a transmittal memo that will kind of say, a reminder, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to look at when you're done with this step, this is what you need to get back to us. So then the Qualification and Selection Committee is responsible for sitting down and taking a look at their proposals. A particular solicitation may just be written. It might be written in interview. It might be written interview site visits, written interview demos. So whatever that particular solicitation requirement is, the evaluation committee will go through each part of that process. Once that is done, we had our regulations changed in 2010. And that's specifically one of the things impacted an RFP, so that once the evaluation committee is done, they submit a recommendation to our office, we review that, and if everything is a go, we approve negotiations to commence. So at this point, nothing has been publicly posted yet, and that was one of the changes in the regulations of the timing of the public posting. And the reason being is once we approve the team to begin negotiations, negotiations commence. It could be terms and conditions, scope, pricing. It could be a slew of things just depending on each case. Once they come to us and they let us know, assuming everything is perfect, they'll say, hey, we recommend this in accordance with the award and a couple of the things they're required to include, and then we will publicly post, here's who we're intending to award to. And then at that point, you have a period of time in case there's questions, concerns, issues, after which the department would provide the contract, they'd get the signatures, any insurance, any minority participation, all of those things get resolved at that end, and then we would execute the contract and any resulting purchase order. So that's the evaluation piece, just kind of at a really high level. But we do that, that change happened in 2010 as part of the executives and our director's reform, because a lot of times when the county's in the midst of negotiations, negotiations may not be successful, and if that's the case, we may have to go to the next highest ranked offer, or there may be simultaneous negotiations going on. And so, once we publicly post, if someone wants to see a proposal, wants to see certain pricing, we don't know at that point who actually may get the award, and that's why the switch in terms of the timing. But the actual evaluation itself is pretty much when we get the proposals, there's certain things we vet, we hand it over to the evaluation committee, they go through their process, which is laid out in the request for proposal. Each RFP is going to say exactly what the method of award is or what the steps are for that particular solicitation. They do a recommendation to us, we review, and if it's approved, or we might remand something back. But once everything is clear, negotiations commence. They notify us once negotiations have concluded, and then we publicly post. Negotiations might involve them. If you're involved in negotiations, you might see the using department. You might also see county attorney's office. You may see our office, just depending on what the issues are. And if it's something that impacts multiple departments, you might see multiple departments as part of the county's negotiation team. So it's just going to depend on what the issues or requirements are for that particular solicitation. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, and then also, in your opinion, what percentage of contracts are awarded to the incumbent, lowest bidder, and MBEs?
MBEs, I'm going to let Grace answer because that's her world. In terms of percentage lowest bidders, low bid only applies for an invitation for bid. So if we're going out on a solicitation under an invitation for bid, primarily commodity-based. There might be some maintenance, might be some services, but that's when, as long as the firm is responsible and they've submitted a responsive bid to the county, then we look at the lowest bid. An RFP is not low bid. An RFP has multiple evaluation criteria. Cost is just a component of multiple criteria. So it's not the component, it's not the deciding factor even. It's just a component of a slew of criteria. And in terms of percentage of incumbents, I don't have that data, but what I can tell you is each solicitation is reviewed based on the proposals that are submitted, based on the criteria that's listed, and a recommendation has to come to our office, and we review that to make sure it's done in accordance with the criteria established and the method of award established for each solicitation. And while I can't give you a percentage, I can tell you that oftentimes an incumbent is not the resulting awardee. We've had a number of solicitations or contract awards where the new awardee is not the same as the prior awardee. We've also had in the last several years where the county has unbundled a lot of contracts. So whereas before there may have just been one award for a contract, now you might have 3 resulting awards, so you have new firms coming into that process, or you might have 5 firms. Maybe we've split up the zones or split up the areas or awarded it by groups. So in the past you may have had 1 or 2, and now you might have 6 awards as a result of that. So there's nothing, and again, everyone assumes incumbents are wonderful. There may be cases where a government agency has a contract with the incumbent and things are not so good, so it's not necessarily that someone is looking to, award to the person that had it before. You always want something fresh, you always want something new, you always want the best value and the best approach. And so that first chance, that first opportunity or crack that you get at that is by submitting that proposal and making sure that proposal is viewed in its best light. But there's no other behind the scenes or magical, step or process that occurs that would gear it one way or another. Now, David has said this often, and so I'll kind of reiterate or paraphrase, and that is, might there be people in departments who have their mindset or who, would like, there might be, and I'm not saying that doesn't occur, that's not out there. But what they're required to do and what we review, because they don't have the final say, what we have to review before we approve something is that the process was followed, that it was fair, that what was published is what was followed. And we've had times where we've canceled solicitations. We've had times where we've remanded things back. I think that kind of mentality is slowly changing. I don't know if it's all gone, but I know that that is not the manner in which the ultimate decision is made. Yes. Oh, sorry. Can you answer the MBE?
Minority and female disabled-owned persons business program is enforced by my office, and I have one full-time staff, which is Al Boss. Maybe some of you have met him. He's the person who enforces the MBE program for the county. Right now, Montgomery County does not have a percentage goal set as to how much percentage we have to achieve for each solicitation. However, Al Boss does review, and sometimes he will discuss with me and we'll make a decision together to decide for a particular solicitation what we should be getting in terms of what services we're getting, what goods we're looking at, and then we'll negotiate with the potential awardee to achieve the maximum participation as possible. So.
Can you let her know what the percentage was for last year?
Last year, the annual report we ran, the percentage was 19.83%. So we're just shy of 20%, and we are aiming at 20%. Once we achieve the 20%, we'll be aiming a little higher next year.
And I'll just add one piece of that just to give a real short background. because of the court cases that have happened in the past, the county does periodic disparity studies for the Minority Female Disabled Owned Program. And based on the results of that disparity study that's done by an independent firm, it lays out what the county's program has to meet in order to still be considered valid. And so based on a disparity study that was done a while ago that we're still operating under, each year the goals are, you look at what happened in the prior year, and based on that and based on what's available in Montgomery County area, goals have to be set based on the 4 purchasing categories, which is professional, non-professional, construction, and goods. And then within each one, there's goals within each minority category. That's why it's not an easy answer to say, oh, it's this or it's this, because there is no set percent. Years ago, the county had a set 20% goal. But based on a disparity study that was done, in order for the program to still be alive and valid and intact, we had to meet certain recommendations from that disparity study. I think someone had a question.
2 questions. One is there anything being done, because you say incumbents don't get preference, but I've read some RFPs where if they narrow the scope anymore, they would have to put the company's name in the RFP.
And, yeah.
I mean, so that,
go ahead. Okay.
And the other thing, is there some rule or regulations to what goes out as an invitation to bid and what goes out as an RFP?
There isn't a rule per se in terms of the IFB or RFP. Invitation for bid is generally an area where you can define your requirements very specifically, very detailed, and really, no matter who responds, as long as they meet those requirements, price is really the only varying factor. That's generally when you do the bid. And sometimes we've had certain non-professional services where historically they've been done as bids, and over the years, because of the service, because of the quality, because of performance, we've realized, you know what, even though we thought that was a good IFB candidate, there's really other things that need to be looked at and reviewed so we don't run into these same issues again and again and again. And so we've made transitions, or we've made changes from IFBs to an RFP structure. RFPs primarily you're going to do when there are things other than just price to consider. When you really have a service, you have a solution, you have something that you need to look at performance-wise, qualification-wise, can the outcome really be achieved? And there's varying things. You might have details, but you don't have the A through Z, so that you really want to hear from other folks out there. In terms of incumbents, I just strongly encourage you, and we have had some firms who will call us who say, you know what, I've read this and this solicitation. We welcome that feedback. We welcome that input. I mean, you can call, if you don't want to call the technical contact and you want to call the buyer directly. We've had on occasion a few firms call that, and we've pulled it, or we've gone back and we've said, hey, you know, you said that multiple firms could respond to this. We're hearing that this is really narrow. We need to take a look at the specification. So I have no problem if firms want to call us. And if you've called someone and someone hasn't gotten back to you, or you don't think they're taking it seriously, you know, just our main office number is on there. Give them a call. Ask them to speak to a senior procurement specialist or a manager. You know, like I said earlier, we would rather know ahead of time than have to kind of waste everyone's time on the back end. Because, you know, my interest, I live in Montgomery County, I pay taxes in Montgomery County, I have 4 kids, which is why I'm running around all the time. You know, I mean, my goal is that if there's a business that's working hard, that's doing good proposal, they should be fairly evaluated and considered just like anybody else. So if, you know, we are not the technical experts, so we have things in terms of contractual, in terms of vendors, in terms of layman language, things that we look at in solicitations, but we also have partners on the technical side that we also rely on for some of the technical specifications. And so if there are issues with those, please let us know, and we're happy to question them or to vet them. Sure. Yes.
2 questions for you. Did I hear you say as part of the process that there actually is a point in time when we can look at competitors' proposals?
Sure. At any point, I mean, we're subject, the federal government, and you might be more familiar with that, has the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. Montgomery County is subject to the MPIA, the Maryland Public Information Act. And so as part of that, you can request proposals or bids. We get them all the time. Bids, generally the bid tabs are posted right there online so you can see the prices because all it is price. Proposals, you're not going to see the whole proposal necessarily online because, you know, there's key personnel name, there may be direct labor costs, things that need to be held confidential or financial information that's not releasable under the MPIA. And so you'd make a request under the MPIA and then we would review it. The MPIA gives a certain time period and they do give certain cost reimbursement for the research and the preparation, depending on what it is. If it's something readily available, you know, not a big deal. If it's done within 2 hours, it's free under the MPIA. But for RFPs, you may not see everything. You may get redacted versions because if someone has developed something that's unique to them, that may be protected under the MPIA. Am I okay? Because I don't want to change.
Just one more
Yes,
question.
sure.
Are you going to make that sheet you had available?
Yes, thank you for asking. Because of the large number of people here and to try to keep a little more green, this will be posted online. So it will be accessible through the website. Okay, so Grace will show you exactly where to download it or where to get it from. Okay?
You alluded, thank you for the brief.
Sure.
You alluded to multi-awards and multi-awardees within one RFP.
Yes.
If my firm is just top-notch on the spot with one of, say, 3 services included in that RFP, should I be making my response to that one area? Should I be putting together a collaboration of other businesses, say 2 or 3 others, to come in as a joint effort?
Okay. The solicitation is going to tell you when we talk about, and the question was when there is a multi-award, and she has, and her firm has the area of expertise in one particular area, should she be submitting the proposal and targeting that one area? Does she need to get together with other firms to respond to all 3 areas? So when I mentioned multi-award earlier, really what I'm referring to is within a solicitation, it will tell you whether there will be 1 resulting contract, if there will be 3 resulting contracts, and how the work will be redistributed or distributed under the contract itself. And it'll also tell you whether it's by group. So we might say we're going to award to the top 3 highest ranked offerors. So in that case, you're submitting the proposal for the entire RFP. But we will select 3 firms to do work under that whole RFP. And in that solicitation, it'll tell you whether we do a round robin, you know, firm A gets the first task order, firm B gets the second, firm C gets the third, and then we go back to firm A. Or it might be primary, secondary, tertiary. If we have certain snow removal or leaf removal, we can't always predict Mother Nature. So for the most part, we may need one award. So we might structure that as a primary, secondary, tertiary. In that scenario, again, you'll be submitting a proposal for the whole RFP, and depending on how you're ranked, you might be the primary awardee where you'll always get the work, and if for some reason you can't complete it or you can't do all that's coming your way, then we have a secondary backup, which would be the secondary firm, and then we have a tertiary backup. So if we get that 40-foot snowfall, one firm likely is not going to be able to do it, although those we structure a little differently because you got to have a lot of firms available. But for things that you can't predict, we might just want to have that backup. Like when the R grant funds were coming and we weren't really sure how much money would be flowing, there were certain services that were being used with those R funds where we thought, depending on if we got some more, we might need some additional backup. And so those types of services may be structured as a primary, secondary, tertiary. You'll have certain solicitations that will say we are awarding the service by group. So you might be submitting a response for each group, or you might decide that you only want to submit a response for 3 out of the 5 groups. That part will be up to you, and it'll be clearly stated in the solicitation. So you're not required to team up with anyone. You don't have to respond to all 5 groups if it doesn't say so.
I wouldn't lose points for not addressing areas out of my core specialty.
No, if it says we are going to award by group, and you only respond to one group, your proposal will be evaluated for that group. Now, the criteria, depending on what it is, might be the same for each group, and it'll be listed, or you might see, here's the criteria for scope 1, here's the criteria for scope 2. You might, now, if you see a solicitation that says, that splits the scope into 3 parts, but we're looking for a firm to do all 3, then yes, even though it shows 3 parts, we're only making the award based on 1 firm. So then you would have to address all 3 areas. Any other questions? I thought there was, yes.
The process you described earlier seemed rather lengthy, weeks, months. Can you put a time frame on this?
Sure.
In a case where it's obvious that there's not going to be enough time for that process that you described and to fulfill the deliverables by, say, the end of the county's fiscal year in then is that a valid reason to submit an exception to the RFP? That the RFP was not distributed in enough time to complete the proposal, go through the process, and then provide the 6 months or whatever performance by the deadline to June 30th.
Right. Yes, and I don't think we run into this instance, and I hope we don't. And if you're getting, yeah, and if you're getting, yeah, absolutely. And if you're getting pressured by a department, let us know. But when our contracts are not, our funding is tied by fiscal year, but the contract or performance is not necessarily. If we enter into a contract in March for a project, that project could span 8 months, but we've solicited, we've entered into the contract, and we've encumbered the funds in that fiscal year, but the work may continue beyond that. We also have many contracts that are multi-year contracts. So generally when we're doing solicitations, yeah, I mean, maybe afterward. Yeah, afterwards, I'm happy to talk to you about the specific scenario that you're thinking. But just in general, for everybody, when the solicitation goes out, we take a look at what the timing is and what that project is. If we have a situation where, when we issued a solicitation and it said, we're estimating this project is going to be done April 1st. And by the time things are done, we're signing a contract March 15th, then we would be talking with the using department to say, hey, it's March 15th, the RFP said April 1st, when you're writing your contract, because again, there would be a separate contract document, you need to put what that date you're expecting really is now based on where we are now. There are some instances where we may need to extend service until the new contracts are in place. But generally, the funding and the performance generally are not tied. Now, if it's a grant and there's a certain period of time when that grant's going to expire, it may be, but it still has to be realistic. I mean, if you're asking someone to do 40 days worth of work and there's a 1-week period, I mean, that's not realistic, unless you're just going to pay, go crazy with overtime and, let them hire additional staff. But there's got to be a realisticness. So, I mean, we do take a look at that when we do the solicitations and do the actual contract documents when we're signing it. I'm not going to sign a contract that says one thing and then 2 days later, a full report is due. I mean, we will question that. So we've run into that a few times, and then dates have needed to be changed or adjusted, or they need to give us assurance that they've had that conversation and that's still a doable date. But I'm happy to talk to you in terms of the specific issue that you might be thinking of. Sure. Any other question? Okay, thank you.